Hi, my name is Gorman, and in this episode of Semilla.VC, I sat down with Gil Herrera. He worked at an ed tech startup called Yogome before becoming a digital transformation specialist at a Mexican-based petroleum giant. Then he worked on the growth team at Y Combinator-backed e-commerce startup Glitzi before becoming product growth specialist at the Coinbase of Latin America, Bitso. We discussed why Brazil is way more banked than Mexico, why there's a lack of Web3 regulation in Latin America. We discussed why Gil, who's from Mexico City, decided to move to São Paulo before starting his startup, and why he thinks São Paulo is the future capital of Latin American venture capital and technology. Learn all this and more in this episode of Semilla.VC. Gil, could you start by telling the audience a bit more about your work history up to and including your current role at Dancia?
Yeah. Hello, Trip. Thanks for having me. So, yeah, for sure. I have been building tech companies for the past decade, and it has been a hell of a ride. The first company that I had the chance to work for was called Yogomi. And it had a sad story, unfortunately, because it closed because of fraud. If you search for Yogomi, you will end up reading some interesting bits of news from different outlets. But the thing is that it was an educational games company for children, educational games for children, and I was the first hire for growth. I was in charge of building all the customer journey maps and all the communication flows in order to try to convert as many customers as possible and to keep the customers that we already have to have them keep on buying the subscription. So we played with different different pricing models, different promotions, and just different ways in which we crafted the customer journey. And it was super interesting because you had two sets of customers. You had on one side the children who had to find it appealing and interesting enough, but also the parent who had to understood that the child was actually learning from that. So that was a great challenge because we got to the point that we understood how we could engage children, but also how we could communicate the parent that the children or the child was actually learning with the materials and how engaged she or he was. So it was a super interesting problem to solve, but also gave us lots of experience because we were pretty much newbies when we started it, so we had to learn from the scratch. I was like within the first 20 employees of the company all the way to Series B with 170 employees and offices in different cities across the world, but also servicing different markets in Southeast Asia, China, Brazil, Mexico, but pretty much all of the Spanish-speaking LatAm, and in the US. Then after the company folded, I went and worked for an energy company called NatGas, which does compressed natural gas for cars and or vehicles, and I was in charge of building a digital customer acquisition channel and revamped some of the digital points of contact with the customer, which was their website and an app. And it was a very interesting journey because I also had to make this company that was built all in this corporate traditional way to understand what I was trying to implement, but also how the company could leverage these digital assets that they had and the impact on the business, like how it actually affected the P&L, how we considerably dropped the customer acquisition cost compared to their street sales team, but also it has some limits to the nature of the business, as there's only so much you can bring through the online channel, and I think that's a very interesting challenge in Latin America because there's each year there's a bigger subset of the population that is being onboarded to the online world, to the online economy, but not everybody lives in there, and no, that those online acquisition channels aren't so effective for different subsets of the population. So we have had to come to learn that the most effective way to leverage those channels is a mix of in between like traditional media and online media. So that was a big learning from that. And then after that, I wanted to get very bad again into pure technology. I got back to studying to learn a little bit more of for example, some database querying languages, such as SQL, Python. I did a little bit more of but it's funny because back in the day when I was working at Jogome, we did product management because we were tweaking the onboarding, talking to the what we were calling back then the business intelligence team, the engineers, the designers, the UX researchers about how we could improve the onboarding of the apps, because we came to understand that was like the best moment for us to sell the product. So we were already doing some sort of product management back then. So I decided that it was time for me to come and fill those gaps with some formal training. And I did a product management certification with Product School, which I know it's very known in the US. And I was recommended to get to go help at a company called Glitzi. They do at-home beauty services in Mexico, in a couple of cities in Mexico. And it was super interesting because it was just about before they began their acceleration program at Y Combinator. So that was very interesting to me and very appealing because I have always being curious about how that unfolded, like how was it pressure wise, which were the resources available, because everybody that I know that has gone through Y Combinator always talks like great stuff about the program, but also the network that they get to build during and after the program. So it's just a win-win situation. And I came on board at Glitzi. I worked with their referral program. I help also with the paid media, because by now I already had gone through all the different steps of the traditional sales funnel. And now with this new framework from Andrew Chen as well, like trying to grow to build these growth loops and this growth engine with the mindset of how you can leverage everything to get different multiples of growth rather than just a straight downwards funnel. So yeah, that was super interesting, but also I had made lots of applications to different tech companies that appealed to me. And one of those was Bitso, and they came knocking on the door, and I couldn't say no. So just after we finished Y Combinator, I joined Bitso, and it was a great position for me to be in, because the company was growing exponentially and also was getting back at trying to enter into Brazil. So initially I joined the company just the task at hand of rolling out new features, new products, doing the launching strategies. But it was funny because I hadn't even finished my onboarding, and they decided it was fitting for me to go launch an app. I did the launch of the Bitso Alpha training app, which is an app in which you can trade cryptocurrency. And for all of those who don't know what Bitso is pretty much Coinbase for Latin America. It's Latin America's biggest cryptocurrency exchange. And yeah, because I just talked about it and assumed that everybody knows about it because it's so big down here. But yeah, so I thought it was a super interesting company, and yeah, I just sidetracked. But the first the first project that I that I got was to launch this app. And it was funny because they thought about, they had already mapped a trading challenge for the app. They wanted to get some a certain volume of trading during a certain time window. I hadn't even figured out how the company actually worked, who did what, and so on. But they told me, okay, go do this, go figure out how you're gonna deploy the campaign, and you're gonna pretty much launch the app for Android in Mexico and Argentina, which were back then our biggest markets. So yeah, I spoke with some of the stakeholders, and it ended up being, and it was a public number, so I feel free to discuss about this. It was going to be a 45 million training volume within 30 days. So we went out, and just through the app, which was a challenge in itself. We went out and ended up doing 51 million US dollars in trading volume within 30 days. So they were super excited about it. Of course, I got some help from the all-time highs that happened in November last year with Bitcoin and Ethereum. But yeah, so after that, they told me, okay, now you're going to be in charge of also starting the promotions division within Bitso. So it was exciting. I was happy because I was handed now this greater challenge that the one that I had initially had. But yeah, just like on a higher level, I was having like the time of my life uh, during my time at Bitso, because I was learning from lots of people who came from different backgrounds, finance, MBAs, other crypto companies, other fintech companies. Yeah, just people with a great background, and there's something that gave me the sense that I was in the right place when there was an emergency. I don't remember if it was December or January last year, but there was some sort of emergency in the company, and they set up this war room. But there was I think it was a Friday, or I don't recall the day, but it was a very odd day, and it was like 10 p.m. in Mexico, which is like 12 p.m. in Brazil, which is where Daniel Vogel is based, the CEO of Brazil. And he was actually writing code in order to solve that. So I thought, where else which is going to be a better place to be than where the actual CEO of the company is throwing lines of code, because he's super invested into solving that problem at that precise moment. So yeah, that's like the level of conviction that I had that I was at the right place within Bitso. But also during that time, I also had been very curious about crypto during the past decade. I was able to buy Bitcoin very early on, like 2014, and also met both Daniel and Pablo during that time at a conference in Mexico, where they had just launched Bitso. And I had seen several iterations of different projects so far, but one thing that piqued my curiosity a lot during this winter were stablecoins, especially USD stablecoins, and all the projects that were able to were in which you were able to get yield based on your balance, either by just holding the balance, staking it, or playing around in DeFi. And it was just a better value proposition that what you just had, which for example, with USDT back in 2017, when I know how experienced people are with cryptocurrency, but this was like the first version of a stable coin, and you just didn't have certainty if it was going to lose the peg, if it was going to maintain the value, if it was going to go to zero. So, but but right now you have things like USDC that are over collateralized, backed by these big institutions. So it just makes for a very solid value proposition. So I got curious about how you could leverage that technology and make it available for the masses. And it happened that I also made I got very curious as well as in why Bitso wanted to be so big in Brazil. I had never been to the country, so yeah, I just decided to buy a plane ticket, go down there, went to the ETH Rio conference, which was great. I had help from Blue DAO, from which is backed by a project called Harmony. Shout out to them. Great bunch of people building great things. And then after that, I decided to head down to Sao Paulo, but it just blew my mind. Like later, I made some research, but the level of bankerized of bank people. Sorry, I mistook the concept, but it's the level of bank people in Brazil. It's like through the roof. 70% of the population is banked, and it's a 212 million people country. So that's like above 145 million who are banked against Mexico, who has 130 million people in population, but only like 35 million are banked. So the difference is abysmal. And then after that, you go to a restaurant, you go get some food, and the waiter doesn't even ask you if, or you don't even have to ask the waiter, which is like the regular thing in Mexico, for him to bring the machine to pay with a credit card. They just bring the machine and ask you if you want to pay debit or credit. And then you go down the street in Copacabana Beach in Rio, and you have people selling out coconut water from a stand, and you can pay as well with the credit card, with the debit card, with Pix through a QR code. And Pix is this super amazing technology that was developed by the Central Bank of Brazil, which is a payment system uh, just like regular bank transferences, but on steroids. You can pay through a QR code, through your phone number, and it just has accelerated the dynamic of commerce, uh, groundbreaking speed in Brazil. So that gave me the insight that if I thought one day about building something, it'd be great if I could go down to Brazil and do it. So those were like the origins of the initial thesis that I had. And that gave me enough conviction to tell myself, okay, this might be a good time to leave Bitso and go start a company, but not it might end not having the best time, because like literally the couple of days after I left the company, everything started to just melt down, like the crypto market with the collapse of Terra Luna, and then all the things that were happening that were happening within the public markets and so on. So yeah, it might not have proved to be the best moment, but it's never the right moment.
How would you compare the current state of Web3 innovation in Latin America versus what's happening in the United States?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's different realities to it, because there's the compliance. I think compliance is the greatest barrier to entry to build these kind of products, and you see that the regulation is very robust in the US. You have to do compliance with several parties. Whilst in Latin America, even though there are countries that are totally close to it, you can go all the way to the spectrum to El Salvador, which has adopted Bitcoin as legal tender. I have been able to witness that in person, and it has different tones of I don't know how to say this in English, but just different color scales. it goes all the way down from El Salvador to Brazil, in which they are like crypto friendly, but are not like super keen on having just direct competitors to the incumbents, and there might be like very big interest from the banks for that not to happen, but also it's inevitable, you know. And I think that just Latin America, I heard this line at the recent podcast that Colombia was condemned to succeed. And I think that pretty much Web3 is condemned to be successful in Latin America, or it might be the other way around. Latin America is condemned to be successful by leveraging Web3.
In the realm of venture capital, I know you mentioned the bank rate in Brazil, but in the realm of venture capital technology, or even if you want to bring in society, what does Argentina and Brazil have that Mexico doesn't? And then what does Mexico have that Argentina and Brazil don't have?
Well, I think it streams down as well from the regulation, because, for example, fintech the fintech regulation in Mexico just isn't as well developed as in Brazil, for example. I'm not that familiar with Argentina, but I think that is it's more friendlier, because you have cases like Velo and Lemon Cash, which have been able to actually deploy a card that has crypto in the backend. So I think that's a great value proposition. And in Mexico, you have companies like Dollar App, which are kind of doing something similar with the constraint from the fintech regulation within Mexico. And in Brazil, I've listened to some crazy things that are happening right now. I sat down to have coffee with lots of entrepreneurs during the past couple of months, and they are doing these credit receivable pools with DeFi, and they're just crazy stuff. And I think that venture capital in the scene, like in Mexico, to be honest, they aren't that neither that I wouldn't say I would say the word is sophisticated within crypto. So in Mexico it's tougher, but down in both Argentina and Brazil, they actually know the power and how they could leverage the technology within the current framework, which is friendlier than in Mexico. So it's just like the space is prime to have these companies being funded. But the thing is, the caveat is that until April of this year, it was way easier to do that because people had more confidence. And with my experience during the past couple of months, it has proven to be tough, because there's lots of uncertainty or seeing how this technology will unfold during the next couple of years, due to what happened with Three Arrows Capital, with Celsius, with Terra. So there's lots of uncertainty about that.
Why, after significant time in Mexico, did you move to Brazil to found Dancia?
Yeah, I had the opportunity to work at companies that were based in Mexico but working at a global level. And then after being in Brazil and seeing how they had different particularities, because Brazil pretty much is China for Latin America. And Brazil's GDP is the largest one in Latin America. And just being around the street of Sao Paulo, you can feel that like the dynamism of the environment. Just you have conversations with entrepreneurs or businessmen in Sao Paulo, and businesswomen as well, and everybody just wants to help each other. They want to see you succeed. You have a conversation with them, and it's just asking how I can help you, and just correspondingly how I can help you as well. So it's just a great business environment. I had this conversation with Juan BC actually a week ago at the fintech happy hour, and he was telling me that they have portfolio companies in Mexico. And they have portfolio companies in Brazil as well, but the things that they are seeing in Mexico have already happened 4 years ago in Brazil. So they are already in the future. So I think even though you have the language barrier, which is like not that big of a hiccup, to be honest, you want to be where the future is. You want to live there. So it was a no-brainer for me after seeing all of that stuff and peaks and just the level of bank people that they have down there. Just like a no-brainer. And once you see this kind of stuff, they can be unseen anymore.
At Bitso, you were responsible for the growth strategies in Brazil, Mexico, and Argentina. How did your strategies for growth change within these different markets, and why?
Yeah, so it was a team of us in charge of the growth strategies, but we had to do lots of deep understanding of the intrinsic motives of our users, as in why they were using the platform form, which were the actual motives of the use of each one of our products, and they gave us that gave us very valuable information as in how we should both approach the current user base and see how we could help them leverage the current product offering, but also craft the next products. And it was a very interesting exercise because there's different aspects to it. You have these cohorts that are pretty similar in between countries, but also they have like different habits and the different ways in which they manage their money. So you end up like having these 2x2 matrix with different cohorts that just behave differently country by country, but also like have certain similarities in between them. So it's just a very interesting thought exercise to do.
I read that you launched Bitso's Android trading app. Was there an iPhone equivalent, or is this Android first approach common in Latin America?
Yeah. As I was saying in the beginning, we also had an iPhone app. But the thing is that if you go through statistics, you will see that the vast majority of users in Latin America have an Android phone. And then on the other side, if you also read about how much lifetime value a user from Android versus a user from an iPhone have, you end up understanding that an iPhone has a greater, an iPhone user has a greater lifetime value. It doesn't mean that the person with the Android phone just has a smaller income. They might have like equal or greater income than the user of the iPhone. I think it doesn't have anything to do with the usage of the phone. It's just the statistical average of it.
So finally, I have to ask Peter Thiel's famous contrarian question, but with a uniquely Semilla.VC twist. What important truth about Latin America do very few people agree with you on?
Yeah, I love that question because, and I think I'm gonna circle back to something that I told you earlier, and I think that Latin America is condemned to be successful because we're gonna leverage super hard the Web3 technology infrastructure.
Okay, perfect. Gil, thank you so much for coming on the Semilla.VC podcast today.
Thanks to you. I had a great time here, Tree.
Thank you for watching this episode of Semilla.VC. Don't forget to like and subscribe wherever you view your podcast.